So now we'll take a look at the note repeat arpeggiator button found over here, which was as of the upgrade from the MK2 to the MK3. They just made this a bit bigger to encourage more interaction with this quite nice function. So I've got some drums loaded in my first group, and I've got a synth sound loaded on my second group. And so let's go ahead and activate this arpeggiator button. I've got it pinned. We discussed pinning, but if you haven't got it pinned, obviously when you go to the note repeat button, now I've activated the note repeat for that synth sound. I let go, it stops note repeat. So I'm going to pin it, and I'm also going to lock it. So the locking function is quite handy because that means, so if I go to another section of the controller, for example my browser, the arpeggiator is locked on, so it's still going to trigger the arp. And so people who aren't familiar with how an arpeggiator works, so it's going to trigger the notes back according to the rhythm set. If I play a series of notes, rather than it playing a chord back, it will arpeggiate between the notes. You can see it's arpeggiating between those notes according to the rhythm rate of 1/16, and this type is going upwards at the moment. So we can change the behaviour of all of this in here. So I could go to downwards. So previously it was going at a rate of 1/16, starting with the lowest note played and going upwards and then starting again. If you go down, it starts with the highest note and then goes down, and then we have up and down, up then down, which obviously gets a bit more dramatic when you add more notes into the sequence. And then we have order played. So the first note, second note, third note that I played down there, it plays them in that order. And then we have chords. So it doesn't arpeggiate them now, it just plays back the chord. And then we have the rhythm rate. So I'll go back to the up type. I can change the speed according to grid divisions. And we go from 1 bar to half bar, quarter notes, eighth notes, sixteenths, 32, 64, 1/28. Of course, probably one of the most common arpeggiator rhythms is the 1/16. And then we get options of normal. So we've got normal grid division happening at the moment, the rhythm. Triplets. Or dotted patterns. And obviously when you select triplet or dotted, you get all these rhythm rates for each one of those timing sets, depending on the vibe that you're after. So let's get a bit of a nicer riff happening here. And we can use the hold button here as well. And activating the hold button means I can let go of the notes and it still triggers that arpeggiator. And then we have our sequence at the moment. It's arpeggiating according to these values that we set here and in a way that is familiar. However, we can change the sequence and it changes the vibe, the pattern. And we get a few different sequences. So we can get very creative sequences laid down. And we could just record, once you get something that you're quite liking the vibe of, you could just record it. And it would just record those notes in, take it off hold. And so a couple of other options as well as the sequence, the octaves. So at the moment it's playing over 1 octave. And so we're set to 2 octaves. It plays the riff in the arpeggiator once, and then it plays the same riff an octave higher. And we can go up and up and up until we run out of notes in the keyboard. And of course, the octaves, if you change this type to down, it starts at the highest octave and then works its way down. Up and down. Take it off hold for a second. Dynamic control. This depends on the sound. If you have velocity, I've got velocity sensitivity dialed up on my massive patch here, so if I have this dynamic setting down, it responds to the velocities of the notes when we hit the pads. So depending on how hard or soft you hit the pads, it will respond dynamically. We can dial this right up. For very dynamic arpeggiator riffs, and we have a gate control as well. So again, for just more variations, more dynamics really, and more involved riff. And we have a gate reset over here, so dialing this back to 100. If you wanted to do a little fill where you got a very short envelope on your, very short gate on your ARP, you've got a gate reset which will just reset it back to 100. Because it's quite hard to just accurately dial that back to 100%, so dial it right down, gate reset. And then we have, in addition to these rhythms here and the units, we have some options up here for just very quickly dialing up or dialing in different patterns. 16 triplets, 16ths, 8th notes, 8th dotted. And the options will vary slightly depending on the settings that you have dialed in the rate and unit. So there's our arpeggiator, and it gets even more powerful when you combine it with the scale snap. So if I go to my keyboard and set a scale here of minor and drop it down to an F sharp, go back to this arpeggiator and let's set 16th notes and go back to my keyboard. So now it's just all snapping to the F sharp minor scale. So it's playing Fs over 4 octaves because we've got the 4 octave set here. So let's just change that back to 1. Go back to my keyboard, press these notes. So now I can just play arpeggiator sequences in the key of F sharp minor, no matter what notes I press. They're all going to be in key. Expanded further by using the chords mode, so now when I press this one note, rather than it triggering the chord, it's going to arpeggiate between the notes in the chord. And it arpeggiates between whatever notes are set in this chord type here, so it's arpeggiating between the pad you press, the note 3 semitones up, 5 semitones and 7 semitones up. And you will also get your chord sets, so very involved arpeggiator riffs. can see how much fun it becomes using the arpeggiator in combination with the scale snap. And let's just go back to our drums now, because as well as an arpeggiator, there's of course a note repeat. So with the note repeat, it works in the same way, but it's a great way for triggering drums. So it's going to trigger whichever pads I press back, it's going to trigger them according to the note repeat setting, so 8th note triplets. And we get the gate. We don't get quite so many options, just the unit, the rate and the gate. And it's a great way to just spice up some drums. Of course, you could turn it off. And then you would need to activate the note repeat. So you can get some very interesting involved rhythms. And again, like as with the note repeat, if we go back into our events here and I snap it and lock it, you can record those note repeat actions in. And really start to build up your rhythmic groove based stuff in that way.